Cartethyia is here, and she's the first character to power creep herself. I've seen plenty of magical girl transformations, and this one comes with some large upgrades. Like, look at how much taller she gets. Let's break down how to play her, build and invest in her optimally, and then look at a couple rotation examples and compare their theoretical potential. Cartethia's gameplay revolves around using her two forms that you can swap between after casting her liberation. Cartethia's base form applies Aero erosion and several buff effects, while Fleurdelys consumes Aero erosion and builds up towards a huge nuke. Let's break these kits down. Cartethyia has a unique Forte gauge that requires her to summon 3 different swords for 3 different buffs. Each of these swords is summoned in different ways. The middle sword, Divinity, is gained from basic attack 4. The left sword, Discord, is gained from either her heavy attack or intro skill. Finally, the right sword, Virtue, is gained after casting her skill. When these swords are summoned, the buffs will be activated by her plunge attack, which will also do significantly more damage based on the active swords. This plunge attack damage counts as Aero erosion damage, meaning it gets amplified significantly by Ciaccona. Note that while a lot of her attacks can be cancelled well ahead of time, the swords summoned from these do not appear until the end of the animation, while the sword buffs are locked in at the start of the plunge animation. As such, it's ideal to get the swords built up ahead of time as to not have to wait through unnecessary animations. Cartethia's intro and skill apply 2 stacks of Aero erosion each, while her basic attack 4 applies 1. Because you can swap between Cartethyia and Fleurdelys freely, this means that you could keep your stacks topped off by swapping to Cartethyia in between Fleurdelys' combos. Speaking of Fleurdelys, let's dig into her kit, starting out with the sword buffs from Cartethyia. These passively buff Fleurdelys in many ways, but the most noteworthy one is Divinity, which causes the Aero erosion on enemies near Fleurdelys to tick twice as fast, and for 50% amplified damage. Fleurdelys is fairly linear other than that. Build up your Forte, then summon big sword and do big damage. Each of her basic attack 5, mid-air attack 2, and skill 2 proc a detonation of Aero erosion, decreasing the stack count by 1. Everything else in this state is just deal damage, gain Forte. The ideal combos to use to build Forte with her include starting with her skill, which leads into skill 2, which shortcuts into basic 3-4-5. Cancel her basic 5 by transforming back into Cartethyia for basic attack 2-3-4. Then switch back to Fleurdelys for her basic attack combo. Fleurdelys can also cancel animations with her jump, which triggers an upward slash and starts her mid-air combo. Note that her full mid-air combo chain is never worth using. For some reason, the final hit of her combo is the weakest attack in her entire kit, and it isn't even close. It's like they forgot a digit in it or something. When your Forte is built up, it's time to unleash your nuke. This consumes all Aero erosion stacks on the target, amplifying its damage dealt per stack consumed, scaling to a maximum of 5 stacks. Speaking of aero erosion, Cartethia's inherent skill gives a large damage bonus to herself and Fleurdelys based on the amount of aero erosion stacks applied, up to 60% for 6 stacks. She also gives AeRover 25 extra Forte when using the Liberation. Finally, Cartethia's outro amplifies aero damage dealt by the other 2 resonators in the party to enemies with negative statuses applied. This concludes the kit explanation. In the next section, we'll talk about build optimization. Let's start out by looking at Cartethia's weapon options. Her signature offers a very considerable boost over opposing options, especially because other signature weapons give attack % as a passive, which does next to nothing for her. The 3-star Guardian Sword is a suitable replacement for Emerald of Genesis, though the value of the crit from EOG is still better, and surely Cartethiia deserves a little better than a 3-star sword, right? For Echoes, we actually want to run 44111 on Windward Pilgrimage. The reason that this is so much stronger than 43311 is less because of stat dilution, but more because 1 costs give a large amount of flat health as opposed to the flat attack that 3 costs give. For the same reason, even running 41111 is a DPS gain over 43311, so it's time to get farming. Sierra Gale is completely outclassed by Windward Pilgrimage, to a point where it's unlikely to be salvaged, even if you have a ton of HP % pieces to roll. Let's look at substats. Crit is the highest value substat as expected, with health % pulling roughly half that value. Basic attack damage is a bit behind that, and flat health and liberation are a step further below. Other options are negligible or flat out useless. For skill leveling order, focus on our Forte, followed by Liberation, Basic Attack, Skill, and Intro. Next, we'll talk about investment. As a main DPS, Cartethiia sequences are extremely valuable, with the biggest S2 spike among all units so far, nearly doubling her damage output. Her S6 also offers a 40% unique multiplier for Fleurdelys, making it very powerful. If we look at the sequence value of her limited support Ciaccona, this gets a bit embarrassing. Ciaccona's S2 only offers a 10% team DPS increase due to the loss of being able to quick swap during her liberation, and her personal damage is so small in comparison that any gains to her own damage hardly affect the bigger picture. Her weapon still holds good value, but other than that, whatever she uses doesn't really matter that much. AeRover is an interesting one. Because Cartethiia is a health scaler, generic support subs such as Moonlit Clouds and Rejuvenating Glow are not valuable at all. Despite AeRover having the smallest raw damage output in this party, it's still technically the most valuable to run them on Windward Pilgrimage. However, if you can't be bothered to farm another set and or level up their talents, you can just run Rejuvenating Glow with Bell, which provides some value to both Ciaccona and Cartethiia. Next, let's talk about teams. The Dream Team consists of a Cartethiia, Ciaccona, and AeRover. AeRover enables Cartethiia to reach the maximum power of her buffs that scale with aero erosion stacks. Ciaccona amplifies the erosion damage, and Cartethiia increases the tick rate, making The damage over time of Aero Erosion as drawn as each of Ciaccona and AeRover in this party. We'll use Gusts of Vulcan on Ciaccona and Windward Pilgrimage on AeRover. No energy regen is needed in this rotation. Let's look into it. Start out with Cartethyia skill and Knuckle, then switch to Ciaccona for her mid-air 2 and basic attack, swapping out to Rover. Use your skill, Cloudburst Dance, and then swap back to Ciaccona as you begin your plunge. Do another mid-air 2 and basic attack, cancelling it with your skill, swapping back to Rover. Use your Echo and Liberation, then your skill and Cloudburst Dance, swapping out after the first half of it completes. Do another mid-air 2 and basic attack on Ciaccona, and dodge cancel it while buffering your Forte. Switch to Cartethyia, use her Liberation, and switching back to Cartethyia mode and doing a basic attack combo. Switch back to Ciaccona and use her Liberation, and then outro to Rover. Buffer a plunge during your intro, and then use your enhanced skill as soon as you can, outroing to Cartethyia. Instantly plunge attack, and switch to Fleurdelys. Use your skill and skill 2, swapping out to Ciaccona for her mid-air 2 and basic attack 4. Swap back to Fleurdelys for her basic 3-4-5. Switch to Cartethyia for basic 2-3-4. And then back to Fleurdelys for another basic attack combo, hitting your Echo before your Liberation. Finally, press Cartethia's skill before swapping back to Rover. And now, the full speed version. What if you don't have Ciaccona? Let's substitute her for Shorekeeper, using Bell instead of Fallacy. AeRover will be on Windward Pilgrimage here, as they can't trigger Gusts of Vulcan by themselves. Additional energy regen is not needed in this rotation either. Because of the large amount of downtime in this rotation, we'll be going for 2 Cartethyia plunges during each rotation. Let's see how to play it. Start out with Shorekeeper's basic 1-2-3 and swap out to Cartethyia. Use her Echo and Liberation, instantly switching back to Cartethyia Form and doing basic attack 2-3-4. Swap back to Shorekeeper, do basic 1, Forte, and Liberation. Do another basic 1-2-3, swapping out to Cartethyia, using her skill and instantly switching to Rover. Use your skill to mid-air combo chain, swapping out after finishing your plunge attack. Finish off Shorekeeper's rotation with another basic 1, Forte, and skill, using Bell before swapping out to Rover. Do your mid-air combo and Liberation as soon as possible. Use your enhanced skill and switch out to Cartethyia. Instantly jump and plunge, then switch to Fleurdelys and do her skill and skill 2, swapping back to Rover to plunge to the ground, and then sneak in a quick Shorekeeper 1-2-3 before swapping back to Fleurdelys for her basic 3-4-5. Switch back to Cartethyia for basic attack 2-3-4, skill and heavy attack. and then do another plunge and basic attack combo, before going back to Fleurdelys, finishing your combo and then using your nuke, outroing to Shorekeeper after. Let's see it in full speed. In the next section, we'll look at how these teams and many others compare. Disclaimer: theory crafting numbers should be taken with a grain of salt, because it's just that, theory. Some teams may have an easier or harder time getting close to their theoretical maximum in practice, due to varying levels of difficulty and usability. It's not perfect, but this gives us a good idea of where things stand. The following table will use AeRover's maximum enhancements at the time of patch 2.4, which is S2R3. There is still room to grow, but that time is not now. Cartethia's meta team stands at 81k DPS, with the Ciaccona team at 57k, roughly 30% worse, but still plenty strong. Sentinel is also a usable replacement, offering 56k DPS, and Ulta is...
How did you get that
DPS?
Well,
Though note that this is with Ciaccona's Sig, and I'm sure nobody pulled that just to play auto. Cartethia's S2 solo rotation clocks in at 64k DPS. This is very competitive with the top end of meta teams at S0. Let's take a step back and compare Cartethyia with the recent meta. The Zani, Phoebe, and Shorekeeper team ranged from 66k to 72k, with the 66k version having literally zero quick swap, and the 72k version being much more optimized. There's also the advanced Zani, Phoebe, and AeRover rotation that hit 74k DPS. The AeRover team in particular is much more flexible in burst timing and front-loading damage than the Cartethyia comp, which has fairly consistent damage and a backloaded nuke, making it less suitable for speedruns. The Carlotta Jojo team, which was a top team for a while after 2.0, is at 61k for comparison, a bit higher than the Cartethyia comp without Ciaccona. When Gian is using the new Windward set, his damage can be fairly competitive as well, with Gian, Ciaccona, and Mortifi clocking in at 62k. However, anybody who's played Gian and Wart know just how jank these characters can be. You'd have a much easier time getting close to the maximum damage on the Carlotta team, but it's cool that old characters are still getting new options and still hold this much potential today. And that wraps up this Cartethyia guide. Between myself and several other theory crafters in the community, we've put in hundreds of hours to implement Cartethia's tech, test everything, count frames, build and optimize rotations, peer review, etc. So, thank you to everyone who has contributed, and thank you for watching. You can check out the rotation transcripts over on the DPS calculator at meiji.cc, or maybe even cook your own rotations or improve existing ones. As always, thanks to my supporters who help me keep doing what I'm doing. See you guys next time. Bye bye. Watch this, like I'm Apex Legend right here.